What's up guys, I'm Natasha. This is not the normal place for you to see me in. I am actually seeking refuge in a quiet place in my home because my children are very loud. We just got home from church not too long ago. Everybody had lunch and now I am trying to film. I basically took a filming vacation. I spent the better part of the last 2 weeks not filming anything, not really doing much, and just spending the holidays and I don't know, some real good quality time with my family. And now I'm trying to re-get into it. I did shoot a video post-surgery. So you can see I have my, if you're new to the channel, you probably don't know what I'm talking about. Hopefully this will explain it. I had carpal tunnel surgery and went through the healing process and all of that. So the last video you guys saw probably was in the garden, my dead garden video, because it's been really cold outside. But now, here we are. Okay, so I'm rambling and we're going to get started. This is the beginning of the What Are We Growing in the 2024 Garden series, which is so exciting and so much fun to film. I always want to point out though that this is somewhat subject to change. I have a lot of seeds. Seed saving is become quite a hobby for me, as well as collecting, to the point that I have so much that we sell extras on the website now. If you didn't know, we have seeds. A lot of the varieties that I'll be mentioning in this video are going to be on the website. I can't guarantee that all of them will, because there are going to be a few varieties that are new to me and to our garden this year, so those ones won't be there, but the rest of them probably should be. If there is anything that I mention that is not on the website, whatever. I was gonna say you could ask me for it, but if I don't have it, there's no point. So, today we're going to be talking about cucumbers. No, scratch that. Today we're gonna be talking about tomatoes and possibly cucumbers, depending on how much time we get into. So, last season, I had these rolly bins. I still have them. I had 2 of them. I'm trying to decide whether or not I should just show you. But basically, I'm just gonna show you. So these right here, I have 2 of these. This is where I was saving all of my seeds previously. This is what I have been saving my seeds in the past, because I have so many of them, because I've been collecting seeds for a very long time. It does take up a lot of space, and so this year I transitioned to these binders. Now, I have many of these binders, but I can fit them on a bookshelf, and they're all lined up. I will link these in our Amazon store. It was my first year trying out this method, so I can't say this is like my favorite thing, but so far I'm really into it. So far I'm really enjoying having these on my bookshelf for my seed storage, and then I'm using these for extra seeds that could go on the website and things like that. So, but tomatoes and cucumbers, that's what we're focusing on. I have to figure out which book it is, because there's no labels. Those are the ones. Hopefully it's this one, because I don't want to go back out to the living room. It inspires a great noise and demand for snacks from the children. It's definitely not this one. This is a miscellaneous one and the winter stuff. Okay. Currently I have 3 of those and I just ordered a 4th because this is rather small. But this is where I have the tomatoes and cucumbers. I like this method from the fact that I can store some of the seeds in here, probably enough for a growing season, and then it gives me a realistic expectation of what I need to save seeds for. It kind of puts a limit on my collecting. So, the way that we're going to do this is we're just going to go through it. I grew a lot of varieties of tomatoes last year. You're getting a lot of rambling before we get into this, so hopefully you're in a chatty mood like I am. Or in a good listening mood, I guess. Obviously, comment on the video and tell me what you're going to be growing, what you're excited about, what you loved, what you hated, all that good stuff. I love reading your comments. Haven't done as great of a job responding lately. I will do better about that. I do not have the list in front of me that says exactly what we grew. I have a video from last year that says what we're growing in the 2024 garden, tomatoes and cucumbers. What I do have though is this book that has all of my tomato varieties in it. So I'm going to tell you what I plan on growing this year, keeping in mind that the night is young, or the season is still young, and I may supplement things as we go on. I'm also going to talk about some of the things that we grew last year that I'm not planning on growing this year. Trying to decide where to start. We're going to start with bigger varieties of tomatoes. We're going to start with things like Brandywines. So brandywines, we've grown these for a long time. We grew these last season. This is another variety that I am going to be growing this year. I'm not planning on doing, I don't know if it was 11 trellises that I did last year that had tomatoes on them, cattle panels, but I'm not planning on doing nearly as many, and I'm not planning on doing as many varieties of tomatoes this year because I'm actually going to cover my tomatoes with some sort of netting, something. We do garden organically here. That's our choice. We're not certified or anything like that because we do use things like ant stakes that you put into the ground because we get really bad fire ants, and I have babies and I'm not gonna have them get hurt by the fire ants as much as possible, although you frequently see me being attacked by the fire ants on the channel. But my like last year I would say 60% of our tomato crop ended up being destroyed by bugs. It was really excessive. It was like a biblical plague on our tomatoes last year. I mean, it was really bad, the amount of bug damage. There's a stink bug right there, ruining my tomato. Thank you. You see? Do you see what he did? Right here? This is what they do. They're rotten creatures. They're beautiful tomatoes. Oh my stars. Be gone with you. Now in horticulture, they do say as your garden gets established, you typically have a really good year where the insects don't attack your plants too much because you're relatively new. And then it starts to come on, you can have a rough couple of years before you start to get those predators into the garden. And eventually it will work into a system that the bugs aren't as overpowering because the predatory insects and reptiles and things like that will come through and eat the bugs. However, putting all that work into my garden and having 60% of our tomato crop be lost to bug damage is just not acceptable to me personally. So I'm taking a proactive measure and I'm going to net my tomatoes. My plan is to net them with fine mesh netting to help with the bug damage. Now, because of that, I will not be growing as many tomatoes, as many varieties, as many trellises as I did last year. Obviously, I'm not going to worry about putting netting on the tomatoes until we get to the point that they're ripening their fruit. So brandywines are an absolutely outstanding tomato variety. They're a very big variety of tomato, kind of like a beefsteak. They're just really good. I don't know, they have a good balanced tomato flavor, and I found that they're not overly seedy. That way I can use them in making salsa, I can use them in making sauce, I can use them on tomato sandwiches, and they're just really good, productive tomatoes. So I really like this variety. I will grow brandywines because I enjoy it probably forever. Next up we have the classic beefsteak tomato. So this is kind of your big tomato, I guess. We're going through our big reds at the moment. We'll transition into big yellows and oranges and all that. I grow beefsteaks year after year. Beefsteaks they're wonderful. They're those really big tomatoes that you pull down and you're like, oh yes, I grew this. I'm successful. I did it. I'm gonna grow these again this year. They're average producers. I'm not gonna say they're extraordinary. I'm not gonna say they're just, but you have to think these are average producing tomatoes. These aren't producing in the same way that something like a cherry tomato is going to produce, or a saladette sized tomato, or even some really productive varieties of aromas are gonna produce, because they put a lot of energy into forming really massive sized fruits. So you get a smaller quantity of fruit per plant. However, it doesn't mean that you can't get a really productive harvest. Planning on growing these again this year. I love pink oxheart tomatoes because of the fact that it's almost like your tomato saying I love you. There's just something really exciting about reaching over and getting a tomato that's shaped like a heart and you're like, oh, the garden loves me back. It's just a sentimental weird thing. There's no real rhyme or reason as to why I'm going to grow it again. The flavor is good. I would say it's about an average producer. It's not really that outstanding. The flavor isn't super different. It tastes like a red tomato. Now this is a pink variety, so it's a little bit lighter. It's not that bright red tomato. It's still really excellent. It's very meaty, so again, it's a multi-purpose type of fruit. German pinks. German pinks are a tomato that we grew last year for the first time. It's again another variety of big beefsteak type tomato. It's on the pinker color side of things. It didn't produce very well. The plants were lovely. They were very, very green, to the point that since they weren't producing, I was questioning the nitrogen in the soil, but the plants right next to them were growing much more fruit, so I know it's not the soil. they just weren't heavy producers. I think we maybe got a handful of these tomatoes and the flavor wasn't so exceptionally different or robust that it was worth considering putting in the garden this year. That doesn't mean I won't try it again in the future, possibly. It just means that this year when I'm cutting down on my space, as I'm listing like 50 tomato varieties to you, good grief. But as I am cutting down somewhat on my space, I'm not gonna put my effort into growing this. This is going to be the first year that I'm going to be growing hybrid tomatoes. Haven't gotten into any of that so far. These are all heirlooms. Let me explain really quickly the difference between an heirloom and a hybrid. Some people get really freaked out by the idea of a hybrid plant because there's a lot of misinformation out there. People saying things that, oh, hybrid, you're talking about a genetically modified plant. That's not at all what a hybrid is. Now, there can be genetically modified plants. However, as far as I am to understand, there's only one variety of tomato that is genetically modified and available to the public at this point. If you are a large commercial farmer, you have access to these seeds and these crops. However, production in home gardening, these haven't been seeds that are readily available to your average gardener. So you may wonder, why do a lot of seed companies put non-GMO or not genetically modified on their seed packages? It's a marketing technique. That's all it is. The majority of seeds are not GMO, and if they are, they have to be labeled as such. Again, they're not really available to people who aren't commercial farmers anyways. A hybrid variety of a tomato is, if I'm deliberately in the garden taking my classic beefsteak and my brandy wine and I'm cross-pollinating them. I'm taking the flower off of one of these and the pollen off of another flower and combining them and segregating those seeds. That is a hybrid variety. That's all it is. Hybrids in their first year have a tendency to be more resistant to pest diseases like early blight or late blight, things of that nature. Which is why a lot of gardeners who try to grow organically are leaning more into hybrid varieties. I love an heirloom tomato. I love an heirloom cucumber. I love all the heirlooms because I can save seeds from my heirlooms and know that I will have that same variety over and over again, year after year. And there's tradition and history in each of these heirloom varieties, which is a really beautiful thing. Hybrids though can be extremely helpful if you are in a climate or an area that really struggles against pests and insects and blight and heat, which we are. We're in the deep south, if you didn't know. So this is my first year attempting to grow hybrid tomatoes in conjunction with heirlooms. Not that I've ever been against the idea of growing hybrids, I just never felt a need for it. And I've always loved the stories and the information that comes with your crops that have these really interesting backstories, like the German pink. It's a Bavarian tomato. It's super interesting to me. It only came into the US in 1883. It talks about it on the seed packet. I think that's just super neat. And there's this little bit of connection to history and culture, and you know that the person who grew that tomato loved it the way that I love gardening. So there's something very magical about growing heirlooms. However, if you are also, that's a tomato seed. When you're trying to can all your tomatoes for the year and make your barbecue sauce and make your ketchup and make all your spaghetti sauce for the year, it can be really disheartening when your hard work and your effort gets destroyed by insects. So this year, we're gonna try both. You never really know how it's gonna go. There are no guarantees, but this is something new that we're doing. I'm not doing this with any of our bigger varieties of tomatoes. I'm sticking to our sauce varieties, so we'll get into that in a minute. Okay, Ponderosas. Ponderosa tomatoes are excellent. I love a Ponderosa tomato. I don't know why my little seed packet isn't in here. I'll have to look through my stuff and see. I just have a photo that says Ponderosa tomato. I am not actually planning on growing Ponderosas, even though I do really like them. The reason for that is because I already have 3 other varieties of really large tomatoes that I'm planning on growing, and it just didn't make the cut. All right, I'm getting into my yellow tomatoes now. So, of the yellow tomatoes, I am not going to be growing the orange accordion this year. Now, an orange accordion is a really big, lovely tomato. It can get up to about 20 ounces in size. It's very ribbed and beautiful. However, with ribbed tomatoes, you will often find a lot of crevices and cracks in them where bugs and insects can crawl up into the tomato, chew it from the inside out, and rot it. Because of that handicap, I'm not going to be growing the tomato again this year. I'm really trying to stick to varieties that are not known for cat facing, that are known to do well against bugs and insects. They're solid producers to try to kind of make up for what we didn't get last year. On that note, I am going to be growing again the gold medal tomato. I loved this tomato. The gold medal tomato was absolutely true to its name. You could give it a gold medal. They're really decent size, not quite as big as something like a beefsteak, but they're still pretty big. They're a really beautiful blend of this yellow with pink blushing on it, and they produce like champions. This was probably, out of all of my larger varieties of tomatoes, the one that produced the heaviest for me, in spite of the insects and the heat and the blight. So because of that, this is absolutely one that I'm going to be growing again next year. I'm just like flipping through my book of seeds. So this is a new variety for me. This is called a pork chop tomato right here. It's a yellow variety of a tomato. It was bred by Brad Gates. It's about a medium size. It's supposed to have these hints of citrus flavor. I don't know, I just really liked it. I thought it was a really pretty tomato because it looks almost like it's tie-dyed. So this is kind of an impulse decision to go ahead and try this one, especially since I have four varieties of yellow to orange tomatoes that I'm planning on growing. But yeah, this is a new one. I'm pretty excited about that. We'll see how it goes. All right, another new one that I have for this year is called the Alice Dream tomato. This, it's really beautiful. It's this smaller variety of a yellow tomato, which yellow tomatoes are known to have little hints of citrus flavoring to them. It's still gonna taste like a tomato. And this one is supposed to have these bursts of red and blue striping in them. My children, for the first year, this last fall, did a production of Alice in Wonderland with the local children's theater. And so when we were looking through the Baker Creek seed catalog and I saw Alice's Dream tomato, and it kind of looks like the Cheshire cat, and my kids love tomatoes, I was like, oh man, I have to grow these for the kids. I'm really excited about this one. My kids are really excited about it, and it's one of the fun things that you get to do when you grow heirloom varieties. You get to try out these new and unique tomatoes. So now, one that I'm not growing again this year that I did grow last year is the Thornburns terracotta tomato. This was the first tomato to produce in my garden last year, which is great, but it was also the first tomato to totally just peter out. It was done. I would say it's a kind of a smaller tomato. I wouldn't call it a medium tomato. It doesn't really get as big as what I would consider a medium tomato. It's very beautiful. It has like a pink honey colored flesh. The flavor is decent. It's not extra extraordinary, but it is decent. It petered out really early, so I'm not gonna be growing that again. Now, this is a viewer recommended variety of a tomato. This is the Abe Lincoln tomato. I've heard lots of really great things about it. I accidentally bought 2 seed packages. I bought one from Baker Creek, and then I also bought one from Everwild Farms. This is my first year growing seeds from Everwild Farms. I will tell you how they germinate and how they do as we start doing the actual planting of the seeds. Baker Creek's always done a pretty good job. I've only had a handful of varieties from Baker Creek that haven't germinated or done well, but I've had more than one recommendation for the Abe Lincoln tomato, so I'm going to be trying that as well as the Dr. Wycheese tomato. Now, I could be pronouncing this wrong. I don't exactly know Wycheese. Maybe I'm pronouncing it the wrong way. I'm really not that worried about it, but I will probably have Seth look it up for me, and then he will tell me how to pronounce it the right way. But this is also another viewer recommended variety of a tomato that I haven't grown in the past, but it's supposed to be a decent sized 1 pound yellow tomato, and I've had so many positive reviews for it that I'm really excited to grow it. So this one made the cut. Okay, another tomato variety that we're not going to be growing this year is the Paul Robeson tomato. Now, this is a Russian variety of tomato, and it's lovely in coloring. Oftentimes when you see tomatoes that have bits of purple in them, you're getting the anthocyanin in the tomato. It is full of heart healthy benefits. It also gives the tomato the purple flavor, the purple coloring that you will see in things like the Black Beauty tomato, which we'll get to. The Paul Robeson tomato is not one that I'm going to be growing this year just because it wasn't an exceptional producer and its flavor wasn't so outstanding that I'm like, oh yeah, I love this tomato, I have to grow this again. I'm trying to be selective. I'm trying to keep it in check. Castelluto Gin. I don't even think I had this one on the list last year, so I'm not gonna worry about that. I'm gonna skip a couple of these that I don't believe I grew last year, so they shouldn't be in the video, but otherwise we're gonna be here for a really, really long time. Okay, the Black Beauty tomato. Black Beauty tomatoes are my favorite variety of tomato. And I'm not a person who's going to sit down and eat a tomato like an apple. I know that there's a lot of gardeners who absolutely love tomatoes, who can eat tomatoes just right off the vine and they enjoy it. That for me is peppers. I love peppers. I can sit down and eat a red pepper the way you could eat an apple. I love them. However, the Black Beauty tomato is so smoky and rich and decadent in its flavor that it is my go-to tomato to put on a tomato sandwich, a BLT. I will eat a tomato sandwich if it is done with the Black Beauty tomato. I absolutely love it. It's the most unique flavor that I have tasted from a tomato so far. Obviously, it still tastes like a tomato, but it's fantastic. I love it. It's very, very good for your health, your heart, when you get purpling into your fruits and vegetables. So this is just an all-around winner for me. I will say, this is the first tomato that the birds go for every year. The birds have learned that this is exceptional too. So another one that I'm not planning on growing this year is the Japanese Trifle Black. This is another Russian variety of tomato. It's a pretty small one. It's, a 4 to 5 ounce tomato. It has that little bit of purpling on the inside of it. It's decent in flavor. It's moderate. I've grown it in the past and liked it. Not enough to be like, yeah, I have to grow that this year when I'm trying to cut back. So I'm gonna pull out these ones from the back really quickly. Prairie Fire tomato. This was a new one for us last year. This tomato has a Brix scale of 10, which if you're not familiar with the Brix scale is the scale that is used for measuring the sweetness in fruits and vegetables. Most melons are gonna start out with a Brix scale of 10. That's kind of where they fall. A very unsweet melon might dip a little bit lower than that, but most melons are gonna start out with a Brix scale of 10. Most tomatoes are not going to start out with a Brix scale of 10. So this is supposed to be an extraordinarily sweet Roma variety of a tomato, which is why I grew it last year. It was not an exceptional producer. It was the last Roma-sized tomato to actually give me fruit from all of the Roma plants that we had, even though they were planted at the exact same time. However, it was very tasty and the kids did enjoy this one a lot. So I will be growing that again for sure. Pink Fang tomato. This is a Korean variety of a Roma tomato. The kids, I distinctly remember doing a tomato test tasting with the kids because they'll eat fresh tomatoes with salt on them. I will not do that, but they will. And they tried this one, and this one was towards the latter half of the tomatoes that they didn't really love. So for that reason, I'm not going to be growing it again. It's a decent producer. It did handle the heat and the blight okay. I am going to be trying and butchering the pronunciation of very shortly here, some Roma varieties of tomatoes that are replacing what I would typically be growing with my Roma size tomatoes, my sauce size tomatoes. Now your most common sauce tomatoes are going to be Amish paste or Romas. I have grown these year after year in the garden ever since I first started gardening. They've always been decent producers, sometimes great producers depending on the season. I always try to save my seeds from the plant that produces the largest Romas or Amish paste and the most. However, like I said, last year my tomato crop got decimated. And as such, I am going to be trying hybrid varieties of Roma or sauce tomatoes. For example, the Cluster Goliath. This is a tomato variety that is on the smaller side. You're looking at something about the same size as a Mara Globe, so technically not a Roma. It's like a small circular tomato, but it is a hybrid variety and it can be used in making sauce. Whereas the Romas, which we're going to talk about, Juliet F1, that's a hybrid variety of a tomato. The Juliet tomato is supposed to do really, really well when it comes to standing up to blight especially late season blight. So I am really excited about that. Now I have 2 of these that I cannot pronounce them. So I'm gonna put the name of them in here, like I do with all of the tomatoes, and we're just gonna give each other grace because I'm not even gonna try it. Actually, I am gonna try it. This is the Granadero Roma tomato. And here, I'm gonna pull out the other one too. And then Galahad tomato. When I was looking for varieties that were hybrids, I went to Johnny Seeds. Johnny Seeds is very well known for hybrid varieties of plants, flowers, all of it. And I looked through what they had listed. If you go down and filter it, you can look through plants that are more resistant to early season blight or late season blight, and so on and so forth. So when I was looking through tomato varieties, I stuck with varieties that were able to withstand more of the blights than really holding up to pest pressure, because that's kind of dependent on the environment. Although some plants can handle it a little bit more than others, it's kind of mostly on your environment. Because of that, we're gonna see how they do. It's gonna be an interesting experiment. If you've been with the channel for any length of time, you know that I'm quite the researcher when it comes to horticulture. I love to experiment and see from my own eyes how plants hold up to different challenges, things like cutting all the leaves off and seeing how quickly they refruit, cutting them down when they have blight and seeing how quickly the blight reproduces as the plant grows, things of that nature. And then I'll jot it down, and annotate it, things of that nature. So for me, this being our first year that we're going to be growing hybrids, I do still plan to cover them with some sort of netting. Again, this plan could change. I am a fair weather friend in that nature. I like to not commit myself to this is absolutely the way we have to do it, because sometimes I do change my mind. My plan though is to cover it at this point, regardless of if it's an heirloom or if it is a hybrid variety. All right, so this is kind of disappointing. Something I'm not going to be growing next year is the Brad's Atomic Grape. I had heard really good things about the Brad's Atomic Grape, and I will say this, it was a outstanding producer in the garden. I mean, outstanding. It was wonderful. But the flavor wasn't what I was hoping it was gonna be. I was really hoping it was gonna be this absolutely delicious, unique, kind of like, I was hoping it was gonna be kind of like a Sun Gold mixed with, which is a cherry type of tomato, which we're gonna get to, with a Black Beauty tomato because of its coloring. And so even though it produced really well, it wasn't outstanding in flavor. And so I'm not gonna be growing it again this year. I think I'm only planning on going two varieties of cherry tomatoes this year. So the 2 varieties that I am going to be growing, and we'll get into the ones that we're not going to be growing. Number 1 is the Blue Cream tomato. This is, for me, the Black Beauty of cherry tomatoes. I have a daughter, my second oldest daughter. If you didn't know, I have 5 kids. And my second oldest, she does not like tomatoes to the point that she will pick her tomatoes off of her BLT sandwiches. She despises them. However, she will eat Blue Cream tomatoes if they are fully ripe. They're very, very good. This is one of the kids, I guess I'm gonna be growing 3 varieties of cherry tomatoes because I'm impulsive like that. So this is one that I've grown every year because this was the first tomato that I grew that she would eat. So I continue to grow it. Now what I will say is I grew the yellow pear tomato last year. And she told me when I was planting the garden this year, Mom, I liked this one better than the Blue Cream. And my jaw hit the floor. I was like, oh my gosh, are you serious? Like, that's been the one tomato you'd eat? And she said, yes, if you're gonna grow one for me, grow the yellow pear. I liked it better. So I'm gonna be growing the yellow pear tomato. It's fun to have a bowl of cherry tomatoes on the counter to have the kids snack on during the summer while we have tomatoes coming in. So I do like to grow a couple of plants because it just makes for a beautiful bowl of snacking tomatoes and I can serve it with lunch. Now another variety that I am going to grow is the Sun Gold tomato. I have grown the Sun Gold tomato on and off each year, mostly because they're such massive producers that by the end of the growing season, you're tired of eating Sun Gold tomatoes. They make a killer little sauce. You do have to sweeten it because these small tomatoes have a lot of seeds, they have a lot of skin, so they're not as sweet. They can have a touch of bitterness in them, but they're really, really good in flavor. The kids, besides Ella, who is my tomato despiser, have said that they really like the Sun Gold, so I will be growing it for that reason. Another variety that I'm not growing that I grew last year was the Brad's Crazy Cherry Tomato. Now, okay, I've literally said all season Brad's Crazy Cherry. It is Barry's Crazy Cherry. I'm telling you, once I get something in my head that it's a certain way, it takes an act of the Lord to get it out of my mind that it's a different way. Barry's Crazy Cherry. I don't know why. I just don't know. But Barry's Crazy Cherry tomatoes. I was so excited to harvest a bushel of tomatoes the way it looks on the seed packet, and I never got one that had this massive cluster of fruit on it. And because of that, I'm disappointed in this tomato. It let me down, so I'm not growing it next year. I'm taking a year off. Another variety I'm not growing is the black strawberry tomato. It's a really cute tomato. It's definitely a sweet, tart tomato, and tomatoes are naturally tart on their own. So I'm not growing this one. Plus, I don't need any more varieties of cherry tomatoes. It's just not exceptional in flavor. And then the spoon tomato. I like these tomatoes because they're cute, they're tiny, they're these little teeny tiny little fruits and they're adorable, but they are a pain in the butt to harvest. So time consuming, and when you're harvesting a massive garden the way that we are, I do not have the time or the patience in 100-degree heat to go out there and pick a million teeny tiny little spoon tomatoes. It is not worth it. So I don't know if I will ever grow that variety again. Maybe one in like a planter for the kids, and it will be their responsibility to harvest it. Maybe. I don't know. But right now I have no desire to do that. I like to try to think ahead when my brain is willing to help me do that. I remember despising so much the time consuming amount of harvesting that I had to do with this tomato, and I don't want to do it again. Pass. Alright, you guys, so that is going to wrap up the what are we growing in the 2025 garden for tomatoes. So I will see you guys in the next video, and yeah, let me know what you're growing in the comments, and I will talk to you guys later.